So last time we read about Kurukshetra, and the next chapter is Man and the Battle of Life. So it's interesting that Sri Aurobindo goes at some length to understand all about war, and there is a way to look at it purely symbolically. And yes, there is no doubt war exists within man, but war is also a reality of our outer physical existence. Now, why does Sri Aurobindo go at such length to speak about the war? One reason is that war has always been with mankind since the time we had a group life. Never has there been a season when war was not there. Some kind of war or the other was all the time going on. And we can derive all kinds of interpretation based on that. But war has been as if a part and parcel of mankind. And this part and parcel of mankind becomes a baggage if he has to strive towards world unity. But we must first understand what war is, what are its dynamics, how do we face this challenge of war. Especially because today we see mankind torn between two different tendencies. On one side, there is a genuine need of peace and unity among many sections of humanity, and it's genuine. It's not just a say thing. On the other hand, we see that today, like yesterday and like day before yesterday, wars are happening everywhere. Of course, Kurukshetra war is something very special, and not all wars can be connected to that. Like there were people when the Ukraine war started, they suddenly jumped into the fray. Oh, this is another war like Kurukshetra. And they wrote to me. I said, no, this nothing to do with Kurukshetra. So Kurukshetra, again the Palestine war. Kurukshetra war is a very special war. Why? Because Mother speaks about the Kurukshetra war. She says, wars like the Kurukshetra come to clear a past, to open the road to the future. So it's a very special war because at that point of time, all the great ones who were supposed to embody some of the highest qualities of those times, men like Bhishma, men like Drona, Kripacharya, Balaram, if you want to put it like that, of course the Pandavas, among them Yudhishthir, and many others, Bhurishrava, who fought from the other side, who embodied some of the highest virtues that man can imagine. And none of this could save the civilization from the collapse towards which it was hurtling. And the reason was that with all these virtues, we had one man sitting at top, which was Duryodhan, with number of kings rallying behind him and number of kings standing against him. And Sri Aurobindo analyzes the situation very interestingly. Duryodhan is a weak king who wants only to fulfill his own ambition. And therefore, all who want a weak center rallied behind Duryodhan. Why? Because they can have their own pie. They had no love lost for Duryodhan or for ideals. On the other hand, Yudhishthir, if he came to the center, would form a very strong center. And this strong center would mean a secure nation, a happy nation, prosperous nation. So there were a number of kings who, despite their differences, they had differences, yet they came together because they thought of the larger interest of the nation unit. So in a way, this war ultimately saved India, which would have otherwise disintegrated into small little fragments. That's how Sri Aurobindo says that in his Bengali writings, that the war of Kurukshetra, the Mahabharata, with all its bloodshed, saved India. Had the war not taken place, had Duryodhan been the king, it would have disintegrated, fragmented, and it wouldn't have taken, for the next 3,000, 4,000 years or 3,500 years, there would have been no security much before that. Because when you have a weak center, you are vulnerable. And there were many powers all around. When we look at the powers that time, even during Shri Krishna's times, there were invasions from the western frontiers of India, through the Hindu Kush. It's not something new. That's why Sri Aurobindo he didn't warn the Indian government, but he writes casually that India is vulnerable through the Hindu Kush mountains. And he spoke about the threat from Red China, because all these wars are those which can completely hamper the progress of a nation or a group life, or they can clear the way. So Kurukshetra war was meant to clear the way towards something greater. That cannot apply to at least the Ukraine-Russian war. It has its own importance, but that's something more regional, more local, and one can look at it always in a larger picture. So the Kurukshetra war. So when this war takes place, how should we respond? So there are two kinds of response which humanity has given. One is that all war is bad. But man harbors warring instincts. And as long as we harbor warring instincts, it's meaningless to talk about world unity. Because these instincts will push us to war. So Indian civilization recognized that yes, there is this instinct in man, which is the instinct of a fighter or a warrior. So what it did was, instead of suppressing this instinct, instead of putting an impossible ideal of non-violence where you just don't, which is okay for a certain kind of humanity, but not for all, it channelized it and gave it direction and purpose. So instead of saying that suppress the fighting instinct, it says fight for a cause, noble cause, or something which is worthwhile, for something which is beautiful. And when you fight for a noble cause, also your inner state, you must practice certain virtues. That's why when we look at the Kshatriya, the samurai, the knights, all over the world, some way this concept was there, but in India it was developed to any extent. There was a code of conduct for the Kshatriya. We see this in the legend of the samurais in Japanese ideal. Now it is lost because Japan has taken a completely the old paradigm of this paradigm of westernizing itself along modern development, and so Japan and China both have lost in a way their deepest ethos. But in India, this ethos was preserved. To an extent, it's still preserved. If you see the composition of the Indian military, it is not based on everybody must serve the military. Because if you do that, then you are doing, then there are people who are not meant for war. They don't have the warring instinct. And when you recruit them that everybody must have a military training, it may sound very good that okay, if there is a need, if there is a mass scale invasion, everybody can lift a gun. Well, when there is a mass invasion, everybody lifts a gun or lifts a knife or lifts whatever is available to defend oneself. You don't need to specially train people that way. There are people who are not meant for war, and if you push them into war, it creates a problem. But that's how the modern mind thinks, that well, we must push, whoever comes as a recruit, if he is physically passes through the test, then he is picked up into the military. To an extent, it happens here also. But largely it has been avoided by the way Indian military is constituted and organized. So if you see at least about Indian military, I can say, so there are regiments which are very fierce fighters. Sikh regiment, very fierce fighters. Gorkha regiment, even now people want, in Tibetan, Chinese wanted to raise an army of Gorkhas. England had. Gurkhas are known for their ability to never flinch in the face of physical pain. I have seen it serving on the borders. The dictum was, if a Gorkha comes and says, I have a slight headache, take it very seriously. And I have seen actually a Gorkha die within 2 hours of complaining. The doctor probably took it headache, gave him aspirin. He would not complain. He is capable of that kind of thing. Some people are built like that. And to top it all, in India particularly, I don't know how it works other places, we have a war cry. So war cry is to invoke the war gods. So there are battalions which invoke the war cry as Durga Mata ki Jai. And you should see them. When they shout with that, even a weakling will feel like picking a gun and going and fighting. Because there are people who are meant for war. And when they are given a good cause, like defending the nation, then it is a very good way of channelizing the instincts. Whereas if you put them elsewhere, they are not channelized. So we see that there are people who are Kshatriyas by temperament, but they are doing business. So they will fight. If they don't do business, if they are put into some knowledge system, there also they will fight with each other. And if they are simply homemaker, there also they will fight. Because it's the innate temperament. And based on this recognition that there is a soul type and innate temperament, Indian society had organized itself around the social order, fourfold social order, which the Gita speaks of, and that is called a Chaturvarna. Chaturvarna was that those who were seekers of knowledge, they were Brahmins. You seek knowledge, and they had several prescriptions and proscriptions, maximum number. A Brahmin was not supposed to earn livelihood. How does he live? He lives by the state is supposed to look after, or by dakshina. He's never supposed to ask. So I keep telling people that you people are conducting courses in Mother and Sri Aurobindo's name, you should not be asking money. Because if you charge money, you are violating one principle, and the mother spoke of that also. She said, knowledge was never sold in India. You can say, whoever wants to offer can offer. You cannot ask. Seeker of knowledge cannot ask for money. And he could not marry a second person. He couldn't say, no, I feel like, therefore. His life had to be a life of austerity. He was not supposed to live in great luxury, and so on and so forth. There were 64 prescriptions and proscriptions for a Brahmin. Only 2 for the Shudra. Brahmin could not drink, he could not smoke, and 101 things. Kshatriyas could smoke. I don't know whether they were smoked. There was hookah, of course. They could drink, they could marry more than one person, they could eat meat. But they were people who had to engage in war without batting an eyelid. If there was the call of the war, it was ignoble of a Kshatriya to turn his back away and say, no, I have to care for my family. So we see, and of course for Vaishya and Shudra. So we see that when Arjun says that I want to go away from the battle simply because my own people are involved. Now Shri Krishna's rebuke starts by saying this is not your true Swadharma. So this ideal of Swadharma was so much emphasized and imprinted upon Indian society. And it has a great meaning still. In fact, if we use literally translate the word free progress, Mother was asked, what is free progress? He said, progress guided by your own soul. It literally, if you have to translate it, you have to say Swadharma. Swadharma is your soul type. And this hierarchy was never permanent, nor based on religion, nor based on, birth, not based on heredity. It was your soul type. So they saw that in the human journey itself, there were steps through which the human consciousness ascended from the Shudrahood, where he had to serve. Service came very natural to him, to the Vaishya type, to where business production came very naturally, to the warrior type, where war and conquest came naturally, to the Brahmin type, where seeking for knowledge was very natural. And this adhikar bhed was very much emphasized in ancient time, which we have lost today. So anybody can get any kind of knowledge, even about nuclear bombs, as long as you qualify for an exam. This was not how that ancient order was organized. Should we go back to that order? No. It has been broken. It was established by Sri Krishna, it has been broken by Sri Krishna. And why it has been broken? Because there was dharma siglani. People later on took to heredity. Just because my surname is Singh, I would be a warrior. There are people with surname of Singh who would hide like a mouse in a little hole. Just because my surname is Pandey, I can become a knowledge seeker. No. There are people who are Pandays who are criminals. So basically, it became a matter of heredity, and hence it was misused. Therefore, Shri Krishna has broken it. The second reason is credit to modern times. Now, all the 4 types must emerge in the same person. So you don't have that old hierarchy. So labor has to be dignity of labor, which is important. A laborer can't say, no, no, I don't want to gain knowledge. He can gain knowledge. If he has a seeking for knowledge, he is an adhikari for knowledge. He can at the same time be in service. He can at the same time, if called upon, be a warrior. So there is now new type is being created, and as we have spoken about it, in the new creation, you won't have these kind of stratification. But we have to understand its utility and purpose before we overpass it, because in our haste to overpass, we may wash the baby with the bathwater. So this is the essence of this chapter, and something else also which Sri Aurobindo touches, which is very interesting. Man and the Battle of Life, chapter 6. Thus, if we are to appreciate in its Catholicity the teaching of the Gita, we must accept intellectually its standpoint and courageous envisaging of the manifest nature and process of the world. The divine charioteer of Kurukshetra reveals himself on one side as the Lord of all the worlds and the friend and omniscient guide of all creatures. On the other as time the destroyer. This is a great paradox. And both in the Gita. Some people say that, well, follow the Gita and forget the war. But the Gita itself shows Sri Krishna as Kalosmi. I am time, the destroyer. So he asks, why have you come up? So on one side, Sri Krishna says, Lok Sangraharth, I continue to work to hold the march of humanity together. On the other hand, when he shows that Vishwarup, so Arjuna says, why are you here? He doesn't say, but he understands his question. He says, Lokak Shakrit Pravardho. I am here to destroy these people. So how to reconcile these? So on the other as time the destroyer, arisen for the destruction of these peoples. The Gita, following in this the spirit of the Catholic Hindu religion, affirms this also as God. So you'll see two things which are very unique about Sanatana Dharma. One is, it does not divide life in the sense that, well, this is world, that is God. God is manifest even in the world. World is a process of divine manifestation, and if you don't engage with it, in it, you can never realize the fullness of the divine glory. So, if you cut away from the world, then you have cut away in a sense from God, because this, at least half of it. That's why the Gita says that the real knower of Brahman or the divine reality is rarest of rare, and he who knows me in all the parts and principles of my being. Samagram Mam. Not just that God is impersonal Brahman, God is Nirguna Guni, those terms. God is all this that is. He is the being, but He is also the becoming. This is the great teaching. Second, which is very unique, which of course is not the subject here, but since we are at it, is that in Indian thought, there is so much emphasis on the feminine aspect of the divine. This you will not find anywhere else. In India, there is of course the Vedantic teaching, but also Tantra. It is very unique where woman is worshipped as not only the giver of the bowl of rice, but also as the destroyer of the world, says Kali, who changes by a revolutionary outlook the entire play of time, the tide of time she can turn. She is the nourisher, nurturer, but also if challenged, her beauty can, her effulgence can destroy all those who stand against it, all that is ugly, all that is. So this aspect is very unique. And at one place, Mother, when she speaks to the women of Japan, no, not women of Japan, later on, but she speaks of man and woman. And she says that India has been the land which has worshipped a woman. But India's paradox is that yet somebody has said that an avatar cannot be a woman. I don't know who said it. People ask me, I say, I don't know, but maybe somebody in a personal conversation spoke about it. Or perhaps he had foreseen the future. That the avatar cannot come in the form of a woman. And it is India where you have to reset the balance, which is what we see happening now. The awakening of Shakti. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. He says India fell because it stopped worshipping Shakti. India rejected Shakti, therefore Shakti rejected India. And without Shakti, you are helpless. You can't change the world. You can realize individual moksha. So in war itself, we see that aspect of Shakti. Shri Krishna is Kali. Wearing a beautiful visage, he becomes Krishna. Krishna wearing the dreadful visage becomes Kali. So the two are one, as we know. And few lines below on the same passage. If we accept at all, as the Gita accepts, the existence of God, that is to say of the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, yet always transcendent being who manifests the world and himself in the world, who is not the slave but the lord of his creative consciousness, nature or force, Maya, Prakriti or Shakti, who is not baffled or thwarted in his world conception or design by his creatures. What a remarkable sentence. What is God doing? As if he is baffled. He knows very much. If we were to ask, what are you doing sitting? He'll say, I am handling it. I know how to handle it. It is why this war or battle has been inflicted upon us. And see, this is so powerful. It's like a tonic for the soul. His world conception or designed by his creatures, man or devil, who does not need to justify himself by shifting the responsibility for any part of his creation or manifestation on that which is created or manifested. Then the human being has to start from a great, a difficult act of faith. What is Sri Aurobindo revealing to us? Till now, religions have done quietly transferred the entire responsibility on man. God created world perfect, man spoiled it. So at one point, Sri Aurobindo says, as if man had a great say when the creation was being made. The fact is, man didn't have a say. Man himself is a product of creation. He may evolve or he may be bypassed. That's a different story. But to blame it on man entirely, that's because of man, it's because of man. There's something very unique about Sri Aurobindo. Very, very unique. That man has his own role. There is a process through which he is caught in the same machinery as others. But it's not like I made this world perfect and man has to be blamed. So that would mean God is baffled and helpless. And he cannot do anything about the world he has manifested. This is a very, very powerful statement to be always remembered. Often I say this. Somebody was talking about problems happening here, there, elsewhere, all over the world. What can I do? What can I do? I said, you have to learn to trust the ways of the divine. Turn to the divine, open to her. Do what you are inspired to do. You have your own role in the play. But don't, people very hastily, draw their conclusions. Can't see beyond the tip of their nose, they draw their conclusions. Wait. World has gone through many, many, many much worse things. And if you read through the Indian scripture, it is enough to give you faith. So we used to read it as a child, we grew up reciting this, that Kansa came, Ravan came, and they too passed away. But the glory of Krishna and Rama has endured. So people said it is myth, but look what happened to Hitler. We could equally say Hitler came and Stalin came. But Sri Aurobindo and his teachings endure. This is the way life. So we have to understand that God is not somebody who is subject to nature. As if we can destroy his creation. It can only be destroyed if he wills. Not otherwise. When there were people who had thrown stones on the ashram, all misguided, and we know that, both the religionists and the communists and the atheists, they had all come together under false pretext of anti-Hindi agitation. Ashram had nothing to do with Hindi. Even today, people speak more of Bangla and Hudiya than Hindi. So anyways, when it was attacked, Mother issued a very bold statement. That statement is not documented, but it is there. I have read in in Shinavantu, one of the things by Nolnida. When he went and asked the mother said, this ashram has been created by the Supreme Lord. And there is no power in the world which can destroy it. It can only be dissolved if the Supreme Lord decides to dissolve it. That was the statement Sri Aurobindo also issued, that if you want me to dissolve the ashram, tell me, I'll do it. But don't take the side of Hitler. He had issued that. I will do it. So nobody else can do it. The same applies to Auroville. The people who can't look why beyond lifetime, beyond a few years. What did Mother say? Who has dreamed of Auroville or something? Who has created Auroville? Supreme Lord. Can we even imagine by stretch of imagination or conception or information, whatever, that anybody else in this world or any other has the power to destroy Auroville? Nobody can. And yes, things will happen. There will be ups and downs. They are part of the play and the process of the Divine Mother. That's why Sri Aurobindo says, we have to start from a difficult act of faith. Because you can't see. When we see the surfaces, we feel like that. But what is faith? That, well, the Divine is behind everything and He will take care of everything. Again, we have to do our bit. Whatever is given to us, we should do it. And there is something given to us which is most important. Nobody can take away. Often people say, oh, I am not getting this, I am not getting that. How? What do I do? I say, then it's an opportunity to intensify aspiration. Who can take away your aspiration? Who can take away your sincerity? You may contract a department and its growth, but you cannot contract the human aspiration. It can, sitting below a tree, it can be like an inferno. So that's what, Sri Aurobindo is reminding us, great act of faith. Finding himself in a world which is apparently a chaos of battling powers, a clash of war and obscure forces, a life which subsists only by constant change and death. And actually, if you see, referring to this picture of Matri Mandir which came some time back, Matri Mandir in 71, only a hole. So all of us are like that. Different stages of Matri Mandir in the making. So there were things which happened then, now they have passed away in the shadows. But what has survived is the Matri Mandir. Same way there are things which are happening now, which those who get attached to a way of life in the past will feel bad about. Doesn't matter. The march of time and God moves forward. People sometimes in the ashram feel, oh, ashram is now surrounded by this people, that people, so many visitors. I said, yes, practice yoga. This is real yoga in real time. You want to practice yoga in seclusion? Yes, all kinds of people are there. They will come. Are we so weak that we cannot, practice yoga if there are people around? So this is where she says, this is how the world is. Change and death, menaced from every side by pain, suffering, evil and destruction. So what the sadhak has to do, the sadhak of the Gita, yoga of the Gita, he has to see the omnipresent deity in it all. And conscious that of this enigma, there must be a solution, and beyond this ignorance, in which he dwells, a knowledge that reconciles, he has to take his stand upon this faith. What is this faith? Though thou slay me, yet will I trust in thee. Great ones have shown the way. Look at Sri Aurobindo. He didn't have... See, often people say, ashram context they say, perhaps here also, I don't know, money is not coming. I say, see, Sri Aurobindo didn't have money for the next meal. And what does he say? He says, I know God will provide, but He'll provide at the last moment because he has contracted a bad habit. He didn't say, Arey, what is the use? See, I left everything. I left my lucrative political career. I left my family. See, I don't know what will happen to my next meal. No. His stand is, I will do what I am here to do. In one of his letters, he says that, no, I am not disheartened by appearances. Even if everything was to smash, I will look beyond the smash to the new creation. That is the spirit. That is the faith. Because you can take away everything, but you cannot take away, snatch anybody's aspiration and faith. It's up to you to give it away. The story of Esau and Jacob, where he sold the soul for the pot of porridge. And it is this aspiration and faith which is going to build the new creation. Nothing outside. Outside things will happen. Outside it has to manifest. But it is this which will manifest. So this is what he reveals, which is next passage. Then, as to human life in its actualities, we have to accept its aspect of a struggle and a battle mounting into supreme crisis, such as that of Kurukshetra. So this is the aspect which we cannot avoid. A few lines below on the same page. We must remember that the Gita was composed at a time when war was even more than it is now a necessary part of human activity. And the idea of its elimination from the scheme of life would have been an absolute chimera. It sets into course correction many ideas and ideologies across the globe where people justify a war in the name of religion. Religious wars were fought at a point of time. But it is not necessary that this has to continue forever. You must understand, there are temporal things. So he is now setting the clock right. For without a universal and entire mutual goodwill, there can be no real and abiding peace. We can't build peace and unity simply by slogans. Slogans achieve nothing, but some politicians get a place in the parliament. That's all. You can't create a slogan for unity. People don't unite even in home. Husband and wife fight. Forget about big things. Because without mutual goodwill, without that mutual trust, you cannot. And these are inner qualities. You can't bring these inner qualities just by forcing, by an act of parliament. During the historic cycle of our progress, because morally, socially, spiritually, the race was not prepared and the poise of nature in its evolution would not admit of its being immediately prepared for any such transcendence. What is that poise of nature? Nature is still evolving the rational man out of the animal. So you can't bring a mankind which is at the animal level, take a leap into the grand scheme of unity in diversity. It's not ready. There will be sages and saints who will aspire for it. As Sri Aurobindo says, that French Revolution, there was this sage sitting on the Himalayan top. He's put it in an aphoristic way. He dreamed of freedom, he dreamed of equality, he dreamed of fraternity. And as a result, we see the action taking place on the plains of Europe and then into India. Now mankind dreams of freedom, equality and fraternity. Whether he understands or not, that's different. So there are some who carry the dream, but mankind may not be ready. So Shri Krishna speaks about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Of course, they are from the Upanishad, is there in the Upanishads. But is mankind ready for that? If mankind is not ready, it will be as a dream. One has to there have to be people who have to nurture this dream in mankind. And yet at the same time take real account of the ground realities. That's something very beautiful about Sri Aurobindo. And that's why at one place, I've forgotten where, perhaps one of the letters, he describes himself as a spiritual realism. It's not a spiritual read that doesn't take into account the real conditions of the world. And says, no, it doesn't matter, you just, do Bhaj Govindam. Because real conditions of the world may demand a very different kind of action right now. The dream of Vasudev Kutumbakam will be fulfilled when man realizes Vasudev in all. That is still a far cry. So that's what he is reminding us. Is mankind ready now? Difficult to say. Every time the mother would meet Sri Aurobindo post 1950, several of our conversations, and Sri Aurobindo say, world is not yet ready. So till it is ready, the heart of man cannot be at peace till it deserves peace. And that's where he says the debt to Rudra must be paid before the greater law of Vishnu can be fulfilled. If we are not ready, meaning thereby we harbor selfishness, our wills have deviated from the divine will, we place personal interest over the divine cause, then we are not ready. And when we are not ready, Rudra will come. It will upset the whole, turn topsy-turvy everything. So what is the recourse? To reset our inner state. And that way I must appreciate that one of the beautiful things that Savitri Bhavan, this initiation of series of different talks. Because we have to become ready to deserve what the mother wants to give us. Few lines below, page 49. A day may come, must surely come, we will say, when humanity will be ready, spiritually, morally, socially, for the reign of universal peace. A day must come when there will be no borders. But if you simply want to have no borders based on that famous song, that let there be, imagine a world without borders, China will say thank you so much. You will see the Chinese everywhere. Mother once saw that. See, I don't want them. I don't want them. Because no borders. That's exactly what the Asura wants. I don't want any borders. No, country is a fiction, creation. Everybody should live by his own law, anarchy. All these are beautiful high things. Freedom, liberty. But man understands it as licentiousness. He does not understand the ideal of liberty and freedom. So you see all the countries which speak about freedom, liberty, what is happening now? In the name of freedom, everything that is going to enslave us is entering. So this is where he says, that's what I spoke of spiritual realism. Meanwhile means till man's heart is ready, the aspect of battle and the nature and function of man as a fighter have to be accepted and accounted for by any practical philosophy and religion. The Gita, taking life as it is and not only as it may be in some distant future, puts the question how this aspect and function of life, which is really an aspect and function of human activity in general, can be harmonized with the spiritual existence. So that's what it is showing. So in Kurukshetra time, war was fought by Kshatriyas. They had a code of conduct so that the business people can continue with their business. The artisans could continue with they were not recruited for war. The seekers of knowledge could light their pyre and invoke the Vedic hymns, preach the scriptures to those who were ready for it. But they were the Kshatriyas, they had to go for war. They could not avoid it. It was part of their bounden duty. So this is how they had organized. So Gita, another unique thing about the Gita is takes into account the world conditions. It doesn't give you an impossible doctrine to believe in. No, we all want peace. Let's have peace and unity. And then they fight over whether you should have samosas for the break during conference on peace. Who will speak more? Who will speak first? Who will be given a better chair? I have seen in conferences people fight over it. But this chair is mine. And the conference is on something very, I have forgotten, on something on Sri Aurobindo and the mother. I said, this is the state. Okay, sit on the ground. What does it matter? But this is how people are. They are what they are. So Gita does not avoid this. It does not create confusion in the mind of people by saying, yes, no, we must. It's okay. Everything is okay. That's not how the world operates. So, for the protection, okay. So the Gita is therefore addressed to a fighter, a man of action. One whose duty in life is that of war and protection. War is a part of government for the protection of those who are excused from that duty, debarred from protecting themselves and therefore at the mercy of the strong and the violent. War, secondly, and by a moral extension of this idea, for the protection of the weak and the oppressed and for the maintenance of right and justice in the world. So it is addressed to the Kshatriya who had his code of conduct, which Sri Aurobindo will remind us in the next chapter. Very powerful. So, but we'll come to that when. Page 50. Nor did almost a little above the middle. Nor did it consider man primarily as a social being or the fullness of his social existence as the highest ideal, but rather as a spiritual being in process of formation and development, and his social life, ethical law, play of temperament, and exercise of function as means and stages of spiritual formation. What is the meaning there? Somebody complained to Sri Aurobindo, oh, these people at the gate or somewhere in ashram, people don't have social niceties. They don't know even how to, greet properly. They just, sometimes they appear very rude. So Sri Aurobindo's answer, he says that is all right. People should be courteous and nice. But you don't go to an ashram to look for SC, small s, small c, in bracket he writes, social consciousness. You go to the ashram and judge it by capital S, capital C, in bracket spiritual consciousness. So, social law is, as we have seen and in synthesis describes at great length, is the second stage of development of humanity when it emerges out of the brute and crude human. He must abide by the social law. But beyond that is the personal ethics. And beyond it is Sarva Dharman Parityaja, the law of the divine action. That the divine will supersedes everything. So, social law, according to social law, Arjuna is being led to a massacre of his own people. It's not done. That's how we judge the action of the divine sometimes. It's not good, no, we are having a rift. Yes, sometimes it's needed for something greater to emerge, and God works like that. And then he speaks about the advantages and disadvantages of this Chaturvarn and the modern mind, which we have just spoken about. One thing which the mother said, something very beautiful, which was important take-home point from war. When she was asked about wars, she said, wars like Kurukshetra are needed to clear a past and open the way to the future. And wars are often schools of courage and chivalry. The spirit of sacrifice. And it's so amazing. Even self-restraint under extreme conditions. I have seen an incidents particularly where the terrorists, because they are like that, they had caught hold of one of the Jawans, butchered him into pieces. It's some tendency, put it in sack and thrown it to the side of the Indian military. And people were enraged. They wanted to decimate and do the same thing to the terrorist. And the commander had to tell him, yes, we will destroy, but this is not what we do. Indian military, when a soldier is killed, after he is killed, it still follows that code of conduct that it will send the soldier to the other side, or if in a situation you can't do it, will be buried or burnt according to the religion of that soldier, even an enemy soldier. And there are priests who are called for that. Say a Muslim from the other side is killed in action by an Indian soldier, so that Muslim is not thrown away. He is given a burial, and a Maulana will be called to do whatever is necessary. Because that is the code of conduct of the Kshatriya. Till now it's something very beautiful that people follow. So, page 51, Indian civilization, on the contrary, made it its chief aim to minimize the incidents and disaster of war. For this purpose, it limited the military obligation to the small class who, by their birth, nature, and traditions, were marked out for this function and found in it their natural means of self-development. Self-development, mark the word, through the flowering of the soul in the qualities of courage, disciplined force, strong helpfulness, and chivalrous nobility, for which the warrior's life pursued under the stress of a high ideal gives a field and opportunities, teaches us, trains us. It was there in Japanese culture, in the knighthood. All this is gone now. India is still preserved, that spirit of chivalry. You can't do an unchivalrous act. You have to have that generosity. You have to have, and there's so many stories, I could go on and on. War stories where people in the thick of the battle still were disciplined. They knew what is required and not more than that. So chivalry, courage, sacrifice, nobility, all these are aspects and functions of war. And then Sri Aurobindo, on page 53 onwards, he speaks about how man meets the battle of life. And there he again brings about these three gunas. Based on our guna, we meet the challenge of life. And these three gunas he will elaborate later on in the Gita. So we'll not go into it. But there is one kind of man who recoils from war and its horror because he is too tamasic. Or he is full of fear. He does not want to come out of his comfort zone. His typical refrain is, "Mujhe kya lena dena? What have I got to win or lose from it?" So he will remain stuck, not realizing that the fire that has caught the other end today, if you don't rush because it's not your house which is on fire, tomorrow it will afflict your house. You don't want to do it, don't do it, but today or tomorrow it is going to reach. So there is the tamasic recoil. So sattva, tamas, rajas, dominated by tamas. Man does not so much meet the rush and shock of the world energies whirling about him and converging upon him as he succumbs to them, is overborne by them, afflicted, subjected, or at the most held by the other qualities. The tamasic man seeks only somehow to survive, to subsist so long as he may, to shelter himself in the fortress of an established routine of thought and action. See, when Sri Aurobindo came, he started writing in Hindu Prakash. Straight away he had jumped into the freedom struggle. Very few people, he himself was confirmed. Because all this was very clear to him. 1893 he started writing in Hindu Prakash. And such fiery articles. What did the then Congress tell him? No, don't write such things. We should only use the method of prayer and supplication. Submission and supplication. Why? Because we don't want Purna Swaraj, all that. Don't have such ideals. They will kill us. They will destroy us. We should ask only some favors from the British government. Allow us these little things. Sri Aurobindo said nothing doing that. Purna Swaraj, and that's how. But he knew the country is not ready. Why? In tamas. People were happy as long as they could say to the British people, British Raj, Sahab. You are a Sahab. Sahab meant Gora Sahab. And whatever they would do, they would, okay, he is doling out and they are happy. A tamasic man doesn't mind humiliation as long as he is paid his tip. But that's not how man should be. And his manhood must wake up next to Rajas. And what does Rajas do? Dominated by Rajas, few lines below, man flings himself into the battle and attempts to use the struggle of forces for his own egoistic benefit, to slay, conquer, dominate, enjoy, or held by a certain measure of the sattvic quality, the Rajasic man makes the struggle itself a means of increasing inner mastery, joy, power, possession. The battle of life becomes his delight and passion, partly for its own sake, for the pleasure of activity and the sense of power, partly as a means of his increase and natural self-development. So we see Sri Aurobindo speaks about such men in the prison, that how they were convicted and yet they could have the calm face and courage. And they had this to say, that tell those who will be left behind not to cry, that will be an insult to me. That is the kind of people you see, and many of them were followers of the Gita or followers of Yogi. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. So they used it for a greater development. Dominated by sattva, man seeks in the midst of the strife for a principle of law, right, poise, harmony, peace, satisfaction. The purely sattvic man tends to seek this within, whether for himself alone or with an impulse to communicate it, when one to other human minds, but usually by a sort of inner detachment from, or else an outer rejection of the strife and turmoil of the active world energy. So what will the sattvic man do? The tamasic will, in the face of battle, will say, whichever is the powerful side, I'll fight by this side. I'll be with you. I will not fight, but please give my share. I'll vote for you. Give me free television, give me free money, and I'll vote for you. Tamas. So I don't care about high ideas. Rajasic man will either, for his egoistic benefit, join the fray. Or if he is governed by a higher ideal, will fight against whatever happens. The Sattvic man will detach himself. He says, this is not my concern. This is how the world is. People fight, but let me remember the Lord. All these three are ways man meets the challenge of life. All these three are inadequate and imperfect. None of this is ideally a God-driven action, but nature-driven action. That is the difference. Page 54. But there comes also a stage in which the mind recoils from the whole problem and, dissatisfied with the solutions given by the threefold mode of nature, Traigunya, seeks for some higher solution outside of it or else above it. War drives one towards that. That's how we see League of Nations and UNO, all of them misused now, came into existence after war. There must be some abiding solution, something greater, something higher, some larger principle. It looks for an escape either into something which is outside and void of all qualities, and therefore of all activity, or in something which is superior to the three qualities and master of them, and therefore at once capable of action and unaffected, undominated by its own action in the Nirgun or the Trigunatit. So this has been what is preached as the highest ideal. Go beyond the gunas. What does it matter? You act based on whatever is your habit or predilection or whatever you have been engaged in so far, till the karma is exhausted, but yourself rise above the gunas. Same passage, last line. But it is to an inner superiority and not to the physical renunciation of life and action that he is called by the voice of the divine teacher. Arjuna is the Kshatriya, the Rajasic man who governs his Rajasic action by a high Sattvic ideal. That's one thing you see all through. Even to Karna, he is not going to fight using the weapon when he has fallen. And Krishna has to explain to him. He advances to this gigantic struggle, to this Kurukshetra, with the full acceptance of the joy of battle as to a holiday of fight, because that's what the Kshatriya most enjoys. But with a proud confidence in the righteousness of his cause, he advances in his rapid chariot, tearing the hearts of his enemies. What a line! Some lines are just so marvelous. Forget about it. Look at how Shobinda described, like if somebody had to actually give a running commentary on what was happening. No television serial can capture this, because Shobinda is capturing now the inner state. Arjuna is advancing on the chariot. Television, you will see the chariot is advancing. But what is the inner chariot? What is happening? He advances in his rapid chariot, tearing the hearts of his enemies with the victorious clamor of his war conch. He had this war conch, Devadatt, which he had been given by the Nagas. And when people heard the war conch of Arjun and the twang of his bow, Gandiv, they say, oh my God, Arjun is nearby, let's run away. So he's describing that kind of a Kshatriyahood. For he wishes to look upon all these kings of men who have come here to champion against him the cause of unrighteousness and establish as a rule of life the disregard of law, justice and truth, which they would replace by the rule of a selfish and arrogant egoism. Wars become necessary when a whole group of humanity dominates, which is moved by selfish and arrogant egoism. Then wars, battles, strife, because that has to go away. And a larger rule has to come. When this confidence is shattered within him, when he is smitten down from his customary attitude and mental basis of life, it is the uprush of the tamasic quality into the rajasic man. Suddenly seeing them, because all his wars have been not against his family members. Only once he had against his family members in Virat. There he simply spared their life. He could have killed them all. Bhishma, Drona, but his high code of conduct, I'll spare them, let them go back. But now for the first time he is confronted with a dilemma. My own people, I have lived and grown up with them. Some of them have been very nice with me. How can I stand against them? It's not about they or you, but about a greater cause. If these people continue, it would mean selfishness, personal interest, egoistic things, arrogant attitude, that will continue. And this other side, Pandavas, is represented by the rule of the divine law. That must be established, of which Arjuna has to be the main hero. And then Shurbindo, Sri Krishna distinguishes between two things. Sannyas, which we hear, sannyas is the renunciation of life and action and of the threefold modes of nature. But it has to be approached through one or the other of the three qualities. The impulse may be tamasic. Many sannyasis, they want to avoid, escape from life. I feel very strange, honestly, I'm sharing a personal thing. When I see in Auroville or even recently in ashram or somewhere, in Shurbindo dedicated organization, when a sannyasi rocker Rob comes and gives a talk, I say he has not faced life. Shurabindo's yoga is about transforming life. You have to be the adhikari. You have run away from the world. Stay with your sannyas in your own cave or monastery. You can talk about it, what it means. But sannyasi, by the very nature, you don't know life. You have no wife, you have no children, you have not faced the challenges that everyday life gives you. So sannyasi is one kind. The impulse may be tamasic, or the impulse may be that of rajas leading towards sattva, or it may be sattvic. What is the sattvic impulse of sannyasi? The true sannyas. The tamasic and rajasic are not good for spiritual means. If you recoil out of this, a kind of weakness, then you can't get God even if you sit in the highest Himalayan peak. There your own nature will trouble you. Nobody else. If you recoil out of rajas, out of the horror of life, still it doesn't help. Sattvic vairagya is the only vairagya that can really lead you towards the divine. So what is sattvic vairagya? Or it may be sattvic, an intellectual perception of the vanity of life, maybe of the imperfection of life, we can say, and the absence of any real goal or justification for this ever cycling world existence, or else a spiritual perception of the timeless, the infinite, the silent, the nameless, and formless peace beyond. The recoil of Arjun is the tamasic recoil from action of the sattva rajasic man. So what does Shri Krishna do? Few lines below. He discourages the tamasic recoil and the tendency to renunciation and enjoins the continuation of action and even of the same fierce and terrible action. But he points the disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue from his crisis and the way toward the soul's superiority to the world nature. What it means very practically in a group life, Auroville or ashram. Runaways from life, who seek shelter for whatever reason. Auroville ashram are not the place for that. Because it's a much greater labor you will be engaged in. That's how Shri Aurobindo said ashram. It's a labor. And the mother would say, if you cannot face the challenges of outer life, you cannot face the much greater challenge of inner life. That's why when somebody asked Arjav, and you'll be unhappy actually, such people become very unhappy after a period of time. When Arjav, James Chadwick, I think his name, Chadwick I know for sure, but first name I've forgotten. He was a poet. He was in the ashram and somebody asked him, he was also a mathematician, that what are you doing here? You see, looks very smart, handsome man with dhoti. So he said, if I say, will you understand? He said, no, try to tell her. He says, we are fighting every day with our ego. He said, no, I can't understand that. Because it's a war, inner war. From outer you have shifted the field to inner war. And if you are running away from life, you will have to confront it. Here you will have to confront it. Ashram, you'll have to confront it. Because the war is inside. Cannot run away from yourself. So those who renounce life outwardly, because even with a sattvic impulse of, this is how it is, as long as you are living, life will hit you, strike at you, knock at your gates, remind you, I am also there, seeking your attention. So Sri Aurobindo says and confirms the saying of the Gita. That's why you see the ashram is organized so differently, and so is Auroville. Every activity of human life is represented. This is not a sannyas ashram, far from it. And so do we see the ashram in Pondicherry, that it is not a sannyas ashram. Every activity of life is represented. So it is not outer renunciation, but the inner renunciation. Not a physical asceticism, but an inner ascesis is the teaching of the Gita. He discourages the tamasic recoil and the tendency to renunciation, and enjoins the continuation of action and even of the same fierce and terrible action. But he points the disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue from his crisis and the way towards the soul's superiority to the world nature, and yet its calm and self-possessed action in the world. Not a physical asceticism, but an inner ascesis is the teaching of the Gita. Not wearing dhoti or lungi or, wearing all white and, trying to sleep on the floor. That's not needed. That's needed for somebody who is very attached to color and dress, and they may need it to show that I am a yogi. But a true yogi rides in the chariot and strikes in the spheres and governs a kingdom like Sri Krishna himself. Okay, namaste.